Today and Across the Fence, Vermont school kids are getting hands-on lessons in aquatic science. The University of Vermont Watershed Alliance provides the curriculum, equipment, and instructors, all for the benefit of Vermont kids. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our goal this afternoon is to help connect you to the watershed you live in and to make you aware of the citizen science programs that the University of Vermont Watershed Alliance offers to schools and other youth groups. In just a moment, we're going to explore a hands-on model of the Lake Champlain watershed. But first, I want to introduce Erin DeVries. Erin is the Aquatic Science Literacy Educator and Coordinator of the UVM Watershed Alliance. Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
What is the UVM Watershed Alliance?
The UVM Watershed Alliance is a partnership with UVM Extension, Lake Champlain Sea Grant, which is a national program, and of the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. And so the Watershed Alliance program is an educational program. It's mainly the go-to program in Vermont for teaching watershed science to middle and high school kids in the Lake Champlain Basin.
And one of the most basic things that you teach is knowing your watershed. And you brought along a map for emphasis?
I did, yeah. So,
need a hand with this? Here we go.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Judy, what you see here is the entire Lake Champlain Basin. This is Vermont side, and this is the New York side, and we have the northern side is portion of the basin is Quebec. So this is the area that I focus on with students, learning about what is a watershed, what their watershed address is. Everyone has a watershed address. Starting, from the top part of the map here, we have Missisquoi Basin, where there's a lot of farms. Franklin County is in Missisquoi Basin. Kind of moving further down, we have Lamoille Watershed. We're here in the Lake Champlain kind of direct watershed, but the Winooski River watershed flows from around here in Cabot all the way to the Winooski River.
Well, I think that's really interesting because I think if you live in Cabot, you could say, well, I can't even see Lake Champlain. How could I possibly be in the watershed?
Right, but it's just the way the topography of the land has been shaped over tens of thousands of years, millions of years really, that a drip of rain coming down in Cabot eventually makes its way through different tributaries into the Winooski River, which then flows into Lake Champlain. So it's interesting that you can be in Cabot, but you're really part of a larger system here.
And so once we know our watershed, you have a hands-on model that explains how a watershed works.
Sure. So this is the watershed model that we bring into the classroom. And it's sort of the introduction to what a watershed is. We've got a number of different land uses that we focus on with the students. We've got a farm, and this is none of the things on here are typical to scale or particular to Vermont, but it gives a good representation. So we've got a farm, a residential area, some development over in the corner, roads, of course. We've got our fisher person here catching fish, and we've got some industry and some forest. And this is kids always have a good time with this because we allow them to put different what we call nutrients or types of pollution onto the land. And so, for example, road salt. This time of the year, we put a lot of road salt on our roads to break up the ice, especially today. It's snowing, thank goodness. So I put road salt, and some people have, you've got grubs and whatnot on your property, and people put some pesticides on their property to get rid of the grubs. That's something we want to avoid, but we show them kind of what's happening. Some farmers use fertilizer, and then, it rains or it snows, and we have them using the squirt bottle here, and we have a few of them when we do this in the classroom and kind of make it rain. And then we start to see that the road salt, the material flows into the lake and over the roads, and then we talk about how we can reduce those nutrients from getting into our rivers and into the lake, and those are called best management practices. And then we work throughout this landscape to put those BMPs in place.
So the UVM Watershed Alliance offers 3 different school-age programs, and one of them is called Lake Champlain Live. How does that work?
That's a trip on the research vessel Melisira, which is the UVM's research vessel. And we go out for about 2 hours onto Lake Champlain, and we kind of do a nice long tour, talking about the watershed, showing them the map. And we collect plankton, we collect aquatic invasive species. We talk about water quality testing in the lake, so we look at the nutrients that are in the lake. We talk about the food web of life, so what fish eat other fish and what do we eat from the lake. And then we talk about the issues surrounding Lake Champlain and how we can best manage those, again, those best management practices.
And is that for the students or is that for teachers?
That's for the students, yep.
Really? They get a chance to go out?
Yep, it's a 2-hour lab, as I said, and they're out on the boat for those 2 hours doing their own testing. They off the side of the boat looking at how clear the water is, collecting plankton samples. We have scopes on the boat that they can look and start to identify plankton with. There's some photos actually coming up now of students identifying the different plankton, and I'm not sure if there's a photo, but we have some big tubs where we collect invasive species like zebra mussel in the lake, and some other plant material comes up with it, and we start to measure and identify what's down in the bottom, and talk a little bit more about reducing those elements in the lake that are causing an impact.
Why is it important, do you think, for kids to get the hands-on experience and what they learn when they're actually looking at the things that they've collected in the microscope?
Sure. That's a good question. I think it's really important because it gives the students a sense of place in their environment, and that because it's so hands-on and they're actually seeing it, it's not just being lectured to them or they're looking at it in a book, but they're actually scientists themselves when they're on the boat looking under the scope and using the charts that we have to identify the organisms. And I think it just gets them excited about learning science, which I think is amazing.
Well, you know, there's learning science and there's hands-on learning, which is a whole different thing, which is not just a book. It's also you get to see for yourself what's going on.
Sure. Yep.
So you also offer a program called Stream Monitoring and Stewardship, and we're going to see in some of the pictures that you brought along that program is very hands-on as well.
Right, yeah. So here's some photos here of students, I believe from Edmonds Middle School last year, getting out. We have some kick nets that I'll show you in a minute where they're collecting bugs in the stream, and here's a teacher and students identifying or trying to identify some of the bugs they've caught from the kick net. This program is our most popular program because there's some in-classroom time, but majority of the experience is out in a local stream. These students were at Potash Brook, just right down the street from where we are today, and they're taught in the classroom what these bugs represent. They represent the health of their local stream. And so if the students are getting out into that stream, playing around in the spring and summer and fall, well, they can now know what's living in their stream and how excuse me, healthy that stream is. Here's one of our cards we have, and I believe actually this is a student who said this is it after he read about it and looked at it, and we have some magnifying lenses that they use to get up real close to identify the bugs, and that's a stonefly right there.
Who doesn't love bugs? And so the program, as you mentioned, also introduces kids to some of the equipment that's used in this kind of research, and you brought some along with you.
Yeah, I did. Well, these are always quite fun. The lobster gloves, as we call them. So the kids go out into the stream and they're scrubbing the rocks if they're not using the kick net. Here it is. This is a kick net that they would put into the stream and just kick it with the rubber boots that we have, and try to get some of those bugs off the rocks and from out of the muck in the stream. And then they dump it into a tub, and that's where they start to identify what's actually living in the stream. And this I also brought along is a turbidity tube, and it really is just measuring water clarity. And so the students will get into the stream, fill it up to the top, and then at the bottom there is a disc, and it's black and white, and they have their partner release some of the water, and they measure how clear the water is based on when they can see that black and white disc.
Oh, okay.
So this is a really handy tool that professional scientists use as well. So it's neat for the students to be using equipment that professional stream ecologists use.
Now, you mentioned that there's an outreach or a watershed stewardship program that's required as part of this. Can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. So the stream monitoring and stewardship program requires the schools, the students, to work with a community partner, and sometimes that's the Natural Resource Conservation District or a nonprofit organization or a watershed group, and they work together to develop. We have stewardship projects where they're actually going out and removing invasive species like buckthorn and honeysuckle, and then they'll maybe plant some trees in place of those invasive species along the riparian area, the river corridor. Another type of stewardship project is an outreach piece where students create topical brochures for their school and give presentations to the school to younger students. We've had high school kids creating posters and presenting them to middle school students, so educating their the younger scientist of the crowd. And we've also had U32 high school present at the Montpelier Conservation Commission. They've been studying water quality in the Winooski River for over 15 years, I believe. And so they present every year to the Conservation Commission what they've learned and their results.
You mentioned the riparian project. I know that we have some video of a school project doing just this, and maybe you can explain what the kids were doing.
Sure. So this here is them, excuse me, it's them out. Well, those are some crayfish that they've caught. And the Williston, this is actually them out in the stream doing their lab and identifying the organisms. And then they worked with the town to, the town planning commission to plant some trees and remove those honeysuckle. We'll see if we get to that in a little bit, but this is again just them out there identifying. We use ice cube trays, and they put the different organisms in the different cubes, and
it's easier to study.
It's easier to study, yeah.
Excellent. Now you have a third program which is newly updated. It's called Keeping the Balance. Tell us about what that is.
Keeping the Balance, I'm really excited about this spring. We've just finished updating it yesterday, actually, and it's typically done in the Rubenstein Laboratory, which is down on the waterfront next to Echo, and we have a big food web activity that we play with string, and the students are representing different organisms in the lake. And then, excuse me, and then we have them, we're having them talk about eutrophication, algal blooms, which happen in the summertime, I'm sure you've heard of. And then we have this game where we talk about solutions to the pollution. So all of our different programs are pretty similar. It's aquatic science literacy that we're trying to build. We teach watershed science. We have the students looking at plankton in the Keeping the Balance lab. So they've gone and collected it from the slip. They come back inside and they start to identify these very small organisms that feed the rest of the lake. So Keeping the Balance is us teaching them how we can keep the balance in the lake so it doesn't become too polluted or eutrophied or, yeah. So
what kind of feedback do you get from students and from teachers?
I get some really good feedback, actually.
I bet.
Last fall, I had a student come in off the Lake Champlain Live Lab, and she just looked around at the laboratory, and she's like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a scientist, and I want to go to UVM, and I want to be in the water and like learning about what's in the lake. And I mean, it was exactly what we had just done, and she just got so excited about it. So that was one of those shining moments of so happy that she had that just aha moment. And we also, when we're in the classroom, kids are really excited about this model, and when we go out into the stream, they just want to get in there. Sometimes it's hard to hold them back for a minute or two before they're diving in and collecting their data.
If someone's interested, what should they do to get more information?
They should contact me. My name's Erin DeVries at UVM Watershed Alliance. You can find us on the web. My phone number is up on the screen right now. And we have our programs begin in the spring, so around the end of April, and run until the snow flies in November. So give a call soon.
Excellent. Erin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.